Let me tell you something about a man's mind, because a lot of women don't understand this part. When you match his distance, when you stop calling, stop explaining, stop reaching, something real starts happening in his head. See, when you were always available, always understanding, always adjusting, his mind was comfortable. Comfort makes people lazy. But distance wakes a man up. When you match a man's distance, the very first thing that happens is not anger, not pride, not confidence, it's noise in his head. See, men are not built to sit quietly with their thoughts when something changes emotionally. When you were always there, always responding, always explaining yourself, his mind was occupied by you doing the work. But the moment you step back and give him the same distance he gave you, his mind loses its distraction. And now he has to sit with himself. At first, he tells himself it's nothing. He says, "You're just busy, you'll be back. This is temporary." Men like control, and control starts with predictability. When you were predictable, he felt safe without being responsible. But when your energy shifts and you stop filling the silence, his mind starts reaching for answers. He checks his phone more than he admits. He rereads old messages. He notices the absence of your presence in places he took for granted. And that's when the thinking begins. His thoughts don't come in peace. They come in waves. He starts replaying moments he ignored, conversations he brushed off, times you tried to communicate and he didn't listen. Distance has a way of turning small moments into heavy realizations. Things he once saw as normal suddenly feel valuable. And what's dangerous for a man is not losing you physically, it's losing the emotional access he assumed he had. Now his ego gets involved. He starts wondering why you didn't chase him this time, why you didn't argue, why you didn't demand explanations, because men are used to women reacting emotionally. When you don't react, when you simply match his energy and step back, it confuses him. Confusion forces reflection. Reflection forces honesty. And honesty is uncomfortable when he knows he didn't show up the way he should have. He begins questioning himself in quiet moments, late at night, early in the morning, in between distractions. He wonders if someone else is talking to you. He wonders if you finally got tired. He wonders if you saw something in him that made you walk away emotionally. And those questions don't let him rest because deep down he knows effort was missing. And effort is the one thing distance exposes without saying a word. Matching his distance doesn't attack him. It teaches him. It shows him what it feels like to be unsure, to not be prioritized, to not be checked on. And for the first time, he feels the emotional position you were standing in. That role reversal is powerful because empathy doesn't come from words, it comes from experience. And here's the part women underestimate. When his mind finally slows down, when the distractions stop working, he starts separating convenience from connection. He realizes how easy it was to have you without earning you. He recognizes how much emotional labor you carried quietly. And whether he admits it or not, distance makes him face one truth. If you could pull back this easily, you were never weak. You were patient. And patience has limits. So when you match a man's distance, you're not playing games. You're giving him space to hear his own thoughts for the first time. And in that silence, everything he ignored gets loud. When you stop chasing a man and begin matching his distance, the second thing that happens is something most men are never prepared for. They start questioning their value in your life. See, a man's confidence in a relationship is often built on assumption. He assumes you'll be there. He assumes you'll wait. He assumes you'll understand. And as long as those assumptions stay true, he never has to prove anything. But the moment you stop reaching, stop reminding, stop holding the connection together, those assumptions begin to crack. At first, he tells himself you're just giving him space. He convinces himself that nothing has changed because accepting change would mean accepting responsibility. But as days pass and your energy remains steady, calm, and distant, something shifts in him. He notices you're not trying to be seen. You're not fishing for reassurance. You're not chasing clarity. And that's when his mind begins to ask a question that makes him uncomfortable. Where do I stand with her now? Men are wired to feel secure when their position is unquestioned. When you always show up, he never has to wonder if he matters. But when you match his distance, he no longer feels essential. And that lack of certainty shakes him. He starts replaying how easily he took your effort for granted, how he delayed commitment, how he gave excuses instead of consistency. Distance doesn't yell these truths at him, it lets them rise quietly. Now his ego steps in trying to protect him. He tells himself he's fine. He tells himself he didn't need the attention anyway. But ego can only mask insecurity for so long, because when a man truly believes he has value in your life, he doesn't worry about losing access to you. The moment he worries, it's because he knows he didn't fully earn his place, and matching his distance puts him face to face with that realization. He starts wondering if someone else could replace him. Not because you said anything, but because you didn't. Your silence becomes a mirror. It reflects back the truth. You have options, you have strength, and you are capable of walking away without begging. That realization challenges his sense of importance. And when a man feels replaceable, he begins reevaluating how he showed up. This is where things get real in his mind. He starts asking himself whether he did enough to deserve you, whether his effort matched his feelings, whether his actions aligned with the image he had of himself as a good man. And these questions don't come from pressure, they come from absence. Absence strips away comfort and forces honesty. Matching his distance also changes how he sees you. You are no longer the woman who waits. You become the woman who chooses. And that shift redefines the entire dynamic, because a woman who chooses herself doesn't need validation. She doesn't need promises to stay. And a man knows deep down that a woman like that won't stay in a situation where she isn't valued. So while you think you're just protecting your peace, something much bigger is happening in his mind. He's learning that your presence was a privilege, not a guarantee. And once that realization settles in, he can never unsee it. When you match a man's distance, the third thing that happens is this: silence forces him to face the possibility of loss, and that's something a man avoids for as long as he can. See, as long as you're present, as long as you're explaining, forgiving, adjusting, he never truly believes you can leave emotionally. He believes you might get upset, you might complain, but you'll still be there. Distance removes that safety net. At first, he doesn't label it as loss. He calls it space. He calls it calm. He even enjoys it for a moment, because men often confuse peace with absence of responsibility. But that comfort doesn't last, because when your absence stretches on, when you don't rush back, when you don't collapse into old patterns, his mind starts going to places he tried to avoid. He starts imagining life without you in it. That's when the weight hits him. He realizes there's no argument to respond to, no emotional cue to react to, no reassurance to lean on. And for the first time, he understands that you were more than a presence. You were stability. You were consistency. You were the one filling emotional gaps he didn't even know existed. Distance makes those gaps visible. Now fear shows up quietly. Not panic, not drama, fear wrapped in pride. He wonders if this time is different. If you finally reached your limit. If your silence means acceptance instead of patience. And that thought unsettles him, because men are not taught how to process emotional endings until they feel real. Matching his distance makes it real without announcing it. He starts replaying moments where he should have shown up stronger, times he chose convenience over commitment, times he assumed you'd understand instead of choosing to be better. Loss has a way of sharpening memory. Things he once overlooked now feel important. And what hurts most is knowing those moments are gone. He also begins to recognize something else you didn't leave loudly. You didn't threaten. You didn't manipulate. You simply adjusted your energy. And that kind of quiet withdrawal is powerful because it signals emotional maturity. It tells him you're not trying to teach him a lesson. You're choosing peace. And a man knows deep down that peace is hard to compete with. This is where regret starts forming. Not because he suddenly became emotional, but because he understands consequences. Men respect consequences more than conversations. And the consequence of his distance is now your distance. That mirror forces him to acknowledge his role without anyone pointing fingers. He starts questioning whether he misjudged your strength, whether he confused your patience for weakness, whether he underestimated your ability to walk away without burning bridges. And those thoughts don't sit well with him because they challenge the version of the story where he stayed in control. Matching his distance also removes his ability to delay. There's no timeline anymore. No guarantee you'll still be there when he's ready. And that uncertainty creates urgency in his mind. Not urgency to speak, but urgency to decide. Because now he knows time is no longer on his side. And in that quiet, uncomfortable space, a man finally understands this. Losing access to someone who loved you freely is harder than losing someone who begged to stay. When you match a man's distance, the fourth thing that happens is the power dynamic shifts, and he feels it before he can explain it. See, power in relationships doesn't come from control, it comes from who needs who more. When you were the one reaching out, checking in, holding conversations together, he felt secure without being intentional. But the moment you pull your energy back to match his, the balance changes. And men are very sensitive to shifts in power, even when they don't talk about it. At first, he may not consciously notice it. He just feels slightly off. Conversations feel different. His words don't land the same way. Your responses are calm, measured, and no longer driven by emotion. And that's unsettling because emotional reactions are a form of reassurance. When you stop reacting, he can't tell if he still matters in the same way. That uncertainty weakens the position he thought he had. Now he realizes something important. He no longer sets the pace alone. Before, he could pull away and return when it suited him. He could go quiet and trust that you'd fill the gap. But matching his distance removes that advantage. The relationship no longer revolves around his timing. And when a man feels like he's no longer in control of the rhythm, it forces awareness. He starts paying attention to your tone, your availability, your choices, not because you changed, but because you're no longer overextending. And that restraint signals strength. A woman who can regulate her emotions without drama shows self-respect, and self-respect shifts power naturally. It tells him you're not attached to an outcome that costs you your dignity. This shift also challenges his expectations. He expected you to push for clarity, to ask where things were going, to demand reassurance, but instead you gave him space. And space makes a man work internally. He can't lean on your emotions anymore to feel important. He has to earn that feeling through effort, consistency, and intention. Matching his distance also removes leverage he didn't realize he had. He could take his time because he believed you were waiting. Now he can't be sure. and that uncertainty levels the playing field. He understands that your life continues whether he steps up or not, and that realization humbles him. There's also a moment when he recognizes that you didn't withdraw to punish him. You withdrew to protect yourself, and that distinction matters because punishment invites rebellion, but self-protection commands respect. He may not say it out loud, but he knows the difference. As the power shifts, so does how he evaluates his actions. He starts asking himself whether he's giving enough to maintain his place in your life, whether his effort matches your standards, whether he's willing to meet you where you are now, not where you used to be. That internal evaluation only happens when the safety net is gone. And what's most important is this: matching his distance teaches him that access to you is not unconditional. It's earned through consistency, respect, and presence. That lesson doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from calm confidence. And once a man feels that shift, he can never fully return to taking you for granted. When you match a man's distance, the fifth thing that happens is he finally understands that effort matters when nothing is guaranteed anymore. See, as long as your presence felt secure, effort felt optional. He could show up halfway, respond when convenient, promise later, and still believe you'd remain emotionally available. Comfort made him careless. But when you match his distance and remove certainty, effort suddenly becomes necessary. At first, he doesn't realize what's missing. He just feels a strange emptiness where reassurance used to live. There's no one reminding him he matters, no one smoothing over his inconsistency, no one adjusting their expectations to protect his comfort. And without that emotional cushion, he starts feeling exposed. Because effort is easy when someone is waiting. It's hard when someone might be walking away. Now his mind starts replaying the moments where he could have tried harder but didn't, the texts he delayed, the plans he postponed, the conversations he avoided because they required emotional responsibility. He recognizes that he had opportunities to show up better, but he relied on your patience instead. Distance doesn't accuse him of this. It simply gives him the space to see it clearly. This is where reality sets in. He understands that love isn't just about intention, it's about action. And action becomes visible only when the safety net disappears. When you match his distance, you take away the illusion that he can always fix things later. Later is no longer promised, and that's when effort stops being theoretical and starts feeling urgent. He begins to realize something uncomfortable. You were giving more than he noticed. Your consistency made his inconsistency possible. Your emotional labor made his emotional avoidance easy. And now that you've stepped back, he feels the weight of maintaining connection alone. That's not a burden he's used to carrying. Matching his distance also changes how he defines effort. Before, effort meant doing just enough to keep things from falling apart. Now, effort means intentional presence. It means checking in without being prompted. It means showing up without being asked. And that level of effort requires maturity. It requires him to care not just about how he feels, but about how you experience him. He also starts questioning whether he underestimated how close he was to losing you. Because when effort wasn't required, he assumed time was unlimited. He assumed you'd wait until he was ready. Distance removes that assumption. And once time feels limited, priorities shift. Things that mattered someday suddenly matter now. There's another quiet realization that hits him. Effort isn't just about keeping you, it's about deserving you. And that distinction changes everything. Because a man can want someone without being willing to do the work to keep them. Matching his distance forces him to confront whether he's willing to rise to the level of the woman he's dealing with. He may feel conflicted during this stage. Part of him resists the pressure. Part of him feels challenged, but challenge is where growth begins. Because effort that comes from fear fades. Effort that comes from understanding lasts. And distance gives him the space to decide which one he's capable of offering. What's powerful is that you didn't demand effort. You didn't beg for it. You didn't negotiate your worth. You simply stopped overgiving. And that silence communicates more than words ever could. It tells him that your energy is no longer freely available. It must be met, matched, and respected. So when effort finally becomes real to him, it's not because you changed who you are. It's because you stopped making it easy for him to stay the same. When you match a man's distance, the sixth thing that happens is it exposes whether his feelings were real or merely convenient. See, convenience feels like love when someone is doing the emotional work for you. As long as you were available, understanding, and patient, he never had to test the depth of what he felt. Your presence filled the gaps. But distance removes the padding, and what remains is the truth. At first, he feels irritated more than emotional. Not because he misses you deeply yet, but because his routine has been disrupted. Men often confuse emotional attachment with habit. When you match his distance, the habit breaks. And once the habit breaks, the feeling has to stand on its own. That's when he finds out whether there was something real underneath. He notices that life feels slightly off. Not empty, just different. And that difference makes him question why your absence affects him at all. If his feelings were shallow, the distance should feel like relief. But if they were genuine, the space starts creating discomfort. That discomfort is the test. It reveals whether he valued you for who you are or for how easy you made things for him. He begins reflecting on why he kept you close without fully committing, why he enjoyed your presence but avoided responsibility. Distance forces him to confront the possibility that he was benefiting from your affection without offering stability in return. And that realization challenges his self-image, because no man likes to see himself as someone who took advantage of someone else's heart. This is where honesty begins creeping in. He asks himself whether he misses you or if he misses how you made him feel. Whether he wants you back or just wants the comfort you provided. And those are not easy questions, because real feelings create a desire to protect, to invest, to be consistent. Convenience only creates a desire to return when it's comfortable. Matching